This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
And in the leadership world, we've made management more important than leadership because, controlling people is the only way to get the most out of. We've over-indexed on quantitative stuff, all the stuff we can measure, over the stuff we can't. And so it's made work pretty toxic, and it's caused businesses to do things in their own interests more than the interests of the people that they serve.
Hi, and welcome to this very special edition of the Deep Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Rennie. Now, if you've been listening for a long time or tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show, and thank you for being part of this special 300th episode. Now, in January of 2020, with absolutely no idea what I was doing, I purchased a microphone and launched the very first episode of this podcast. Now, since then, I've gone on to interview hundreds of leadership experts on the show, and the show grew into a top 100 management podcast, and Deep Leadership is now ranked as a top 1.5% show out of 3.3 million podcasts globally. And I want to thank you for being part of this amazing journey. Now, to celebrate this special episode, my guest today is longtime friend of the show, Neal Woodson. You might remember him from episodes 28 and 183. I wanted to have Neal back on the show to launch his brand new book, Giving a Shit: How a Willingness to be Inconvenienced Can Transform Your Business and Life. Now, I'm proud to have written the foreword to this amazing new book about the importance of service. As part of this special episode, Neal and I are giving away 30 signed copies of this new book to the listeners of Deep Leadership. All you have to do is be one of the first 30 people to subscribe and comment on the video of this episode on YouTube today. There are only 30 free copies, so make sure you make your way to YouTube right away to subscribe and comment. Well, that is it. I hope you enjoyed this amazing conversation with my good friend Neal Woodson. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to this special edition of the Deep Leadership Podcast. This is our 300th episode, and I'm joined by Neal Woodson. You might remember him from way back in episode 28 and later in episode 183. And for this special episode, I wanted to have him back on the show to talk about his brand new book. Now, Neal is a teacher, a coach, an author, speaker, who is a determined believer in putting people first as the key to better business. His vision is a world where workplaces and customer spaces are focused on people helping other people succeed. His background includes decades of leadership experience in a variety of industries. He has written over 500 blog posts and has 2 amazing books. His latest book is called Giving a Shit: How a Willingness to be Inconvenienced Can Transform Your Business, Work, and Life. And it offers readers a plan for making businesses more human. And by the way, your humble podcast host has written the foreword to this wonderful new book. Now, I'm excited to have Neal back on the show for this very special 300th episode to discuss why leaders should give a shit. So, Neal, welcome back to the show.
Hi, John. It's so good to be back. I love your podcast, and I love all the things you're doing, and it's a privilege to be invited to be here.
Absolutely. I love what you're doing. I mean, I think that I've been following all your blog posts. Both your books have been amazing. So, and I'm just proud that we're able to work together on this book. At least I got a chance to put some words in this new book and in the foreword. But what a fantastic book. And the other thing is you're getting me to swear. I normally don't swear on this podcast, but we are going there because this book is called Giving a Shit. And I think we have to talk about it. So, so you got me there.
Well, yeah, there's a story behind that, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
We will get to that, absolutely.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to start off like you're my go-to guy when it comes to service. You're an expert in the area of service. And the first sentence on your website says something that I really, really love, and I want to get your take on it. It says, service can change the world. In fact, it already has. Now, explain what that means and why you wrote that.
Um, Let me start with a definition.
Okay.
Years ago, I was asked by a CEO of a company to come speak with his executive team, and he wanted me to talk about service because he wanted to get the company more focused on service, and he thought you should start with the executive team. So at the beginning of my presentation, I asked the whole room, "What is service?" And the answers I got back were things like going above and beyond for the customer, exceeding customer expectations, making customers happy by solving their problems, stuff like that. It was like somebody ate a marketing book and threw it up. And I said, stop. I ask, what is service? I need what fundamentally is service? And I got more of the same. So I had to stop them again. I said, no, you don't get this. Service is more than customer service. And it's not complicated. It's really simple. It's just helping people. It's people helping people to accomplish things and achieve things. And service is something we all do, and we all do it all day. I mean, if you help your kids get ready for school, that's service. You take them to the bus stop, it's service. If you help somebody at work, it's service. If you pick up milk on the way home, it's service. Help with dinner, put away dishes, it's service. We do it constantly. It's absolutely fundamental to being human. It's how we've survived as a species. It's how we've built cities and conquered disease and created bridges and buildings and all these things and gone to the moon and come back. And it's all because we've helped each other. In fact, there are some sociologists who believe it's our superpower. We're one of the only species, and may be the only species, that will help others at a cost to ourselves. In fact, we're one of the only species that will help other species. And so I believe it's super powerful for us. And I think if we want to cure the ills of the world and make our world a better place, that's the place to start, with just helping each other.
I absolutely love that, and I wrote in the foreword to the book the fact that I had to speak at a Veterans Day event, and my speech was on service, because I think you hear veterans, you see them, and you hear this, well, thank you for your service. Well, what does that really mean? And so that I walk them through that, the gathered VIPs and the students, what is service, and that's. And I said that just because I'm a veteran and I served my country, it doesn't mean. And I explained to the students how they can serve their school, how can they serve their family, how can they serve their community, gave examples of it. So again, it's about people helping other people, and often sometimes sacrificially as well. And I think that's an important part of service. It's not about just customer service. And I love the fact that you point that out. And you talk about that all the time. Last time you were on the show, I kept saying customer service and you kept kicking me. Well, you're right. It's about serving others, and about, and again, sometimes sacrificially as well. So, so I absolutely love the fact that you stick to this, and it's a big part of what you write about, which I absolutely love. Let's talk about this new book. It's called Giving a Shit. And by the way, shit is not spelled shit in the book, but it's your typical, it's $1. So there's the book right there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it as it's bright orange. It's a great cover. Explain why you chose to call it that.
Well, there's a story. There's always a story. Years ago, I think it was 2017, because I wrote a blog post about it. So I think it was 2017. And I was playing golf with some guys on a Saturday morning. And, you talk about family, and you talk about your kids, and you talk about all these things. And inevitably, you talk about work. And one of the guys owns his own business. And he said, I know you talk about leadership and you teach customer service, and I need your help. What's something I can tell my team members so they'll deliver great service? Of course, my head starts spinning. I'm thinking of everything under the sun. I want to think of something profound. And I don't know, something just bubbled up in me, and it just came out. And I said, you got to give a shit.
Yeah.
And the guy turned to me and he kind of chuckled. And he said, is that it? And I said, well, sort of. Because it's not just about your customer-facing team members. You have to, your administrative team has to, your executive team has to, your managers have to, and your customer-facing people have to as well. They all have to care for and serve each other if you want your entire organization to serve the customer. Because it's not just people serving the customer, it's your entire organization serving the customer. And so that's the only way it'll work. And so that phrase stuck in my head, and it didn't come out until I started writing the book. The real thing that got the ball rolling for the book was something my wife said. Back in 2019, we had planned on taking a trip in 2020 to Spain. We were going to go to Madrid and Malaga and Barcelona, and we had it all planned, flights, the whole deal. Well, the pandemic killed all that. And my wife, God bless her, she's more organized than I am and more patient than I am, so she usually handles all the arrangements. And of course, that meant she handled all of the cancellation and all that stuff. So one day I'm doing something and I walk upstairs and I hear her talking on the phone, and then she hangs up the phone and she yells out, nothing is ever easy. And the first thought in my mind was, please God, don't let that be about me. Exactly. And so I peeked my head in the door and I said, is everything okay? And she says, I don't understand. She had just gotten off the phone with the airline. She said, why do companies make everything so hard? And why does it seem they just don't care about their customers? Well, we carried on and we talked all that through. But I started to think about it. And I started to think, well, why is that true? It seems like that's true. There's so many companies that make it so hard. And it just seems like they don't care.
Mm.
And that really, all those questions swirling around, that's really what led to the book. And calling it Giving a Shit came later. But so that's all of that together is kind of what brought the book on.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And it's funny because we actually had an expression when I was in the military that said my gas gauge was low. So we would say, my gas gauge is low. And then, man, my give a shit gauge was low. Like, I don't give a shit. So we would actually acknowledge when we didn't care. And so after a while, you get worn down and your gas gauge is very low. And that gauge is very low. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah.
Well, there was an interesting thing. The thing I found out was that giving a shit actually means something more than just care and more than concern. And I don't want to get in that now because that's in the book, but
right.
I found out something about it that was important.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. But so just give our listeners a flavor of what's the big idea behind the book. Obviously, you told about some of the origin story, but what's the big idea in the book?
The big idea is really, it's pretty simple. First of all, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be hard, and they can care about their customers. So we can do better, essentially. So we can do better than that. And so I wrote the book in two parts. The first part looks at why we're here and why it doesn't have to be this way. The other part of the book is kind of a how-to guide on how we can do better. And it's not just better as an organization, it's better individually, how in my own individual performance I can do better, but also how can an organization do better? So I kind of talk about both. Mm-hmm. So that essentially is the big idea.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And that's why I love this book so much. It's such an important topic that we need to be talking more about. In the book, explain the difference or the idea of competitive self-interest versus cooperative helpfulness. What are the differences? What are these terms and why are they important?
Well, I was looking for, what is behind the whole issue of companies make it difficult. And kind of the first thing I thought was, well, it's because they're just human, and humans we're selfish. We are, that's what we are. But the more so I started doing a lot of research into that. Is that really true? Or is that what we are? And what I found was that we have kind of two opposing viewpoints. One is based on a popular narrative, and the other is based on science. So buckle your seatbelt. I'm going to take you on a ride. The popular narrative, which comes to us mostly through writing and art and music and drama and religion played a big part in this, is that humans basically are selfish and competitive at our core. The strongest are the ones that survive, and you have to look after yourself, right? You got to take care of yourself and beat the other guys. That's kind of what we've grown up to know. And, business feeds off of that, just like a lot of other institutions. And I started to look at, well, why is that? Why is that so? Is that really true? And I'll talk about the science in a minute. But what I found was that for centuries, we have been kind of fed a line, and we've been fed that line. I mean, if you think about it, go back to the Bible. If you go back to the Bible, in the book of Genesis, there's about 2 pages where everything's great. Humans are great. It's rainbows and unicorns and all things are good. And then we bite into an apple and it's all downhill from there. The other 400 pages are a battle between good and evil. And that line gets picked up throughout history. And for example, in philosophy, Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century, he describes it as the state of man, or the state of humankind, is a war of all against all. We are rotten at the core. And then we get a huge message in the 19th century from a guy named Herbert Spencer. And Herbert Spencer was a contemporary of Darwin. And he kind of takes Darwin's ideas and twists them into his own kind of formation. He actually coins the term survival of the fittest. Darwin did not say that. Spencer said survival of the fittest. Darwin actually said something more along the lines of survival of the compassionate. Because Darwin, in the book Descent of Man, he talks about the fact that the people who will survive are the ones who cooperate the most. Because those are the groups that are going to survive, not the ones that fight each other. But Spencer picks up this line. He says, no, it's about survival of the fittest. And he uses that to justify his belief that some races and social classes are better than other people, and that's why they're superior. And that turns into a whole lot of bad stuff. I mean, apartheid came from that. Nazism came out of that. White supremacy came out of that. And so a lot of bad came from that. And then you can add even more to that. In the 20th century, we've got people like Ayn Rand, who basically says, you don't need to worry about anybody else. You worry about yourself. Just look after yourself. Your duty is to your own happiness. She actually opposed altruism. She opposed looking out for others. She thought that you should only look after yourself. She even wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. And so a lot of that you get hit with that enough, and we begin to believe it. We begin to believe that that's who we are. And so I read all this stuff, and it was kind of a downer, honestly. I was doing the research, and I was kind of like, this is kind of, we are bad people. But a couple things bothered me. One was, if that's true, why do we have people that literally sign up to run into a fire to save strangers? And it would be one thing if they were running to a fire to save family members, but that they run into a fire to save people they don't even know. And why is it when we have a tragedy, why is it that people will come out in droves to help each other? And then one of the things I found in the research was, and I didn't really know this, but that young infants, as young as 18 months, begin showing helpful behaviors. They start to do things, and it's without prompting or being told. They just start to do things to help other people. If an adult drops something, they'll reach out to try to help them pick it up. At 2 years old, they've got some studies that they've done where children will go and try to open a door for an adult that has their arms full of things. And they do it innately. And so that really troubled me, because I was thinking, well, if we're selfish and competitive, where's that come from? So I went looking at the science, and I found a couple of big things. There's more, but I found these couple of big things. One was that we didn't start out this way. We've been on the planet for about 300,000 years. And for about 290,000 of those, we were cooperative and helpful. All the talk that primitive humans were savages is just not true, because all the evidence points to them being helpful to each other. And it makes sense, right? Because they had to go out and kill a saber-toothed tiger, and you didn't do that by yourself, right? And modern study of primitive groups, they found that it confirms that there are a few modern hunter-gatherer groups that are very primitive, mostly on Pacific Islands and things. And they are cooperative and helpful. In fact, they punish people who are competitive and selfish. And so it wasn't until we started settling down in farming that we started to shift to being more possessive, because, okay, now I'm growing this stuff for me and my family. And so I've got to defend it. And so the mindset started shifting about 10,000 years ago. But prior to that, we were largely helpful to each other. Now, the other part of the science has to do with biology. I found this really interesting. There are two kind of hormones. There's a lot of chemical stuff going on inside of us, but there are two particularly influential hormones that come into play. One is cortisol, and the other one's oxytocin. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone. When we're afraid or we're threatened, it comes into play. And what happens when it comes into play is it increases our blood pressure and our heart rate. It slows down our metabolism. It slows down non-essential things like reasoning. It's why when you get into a fight, you're not thinking straight, right? And it's good. We need that. Humans, we have to have it. Now, if we didn't, we'd all be dead. However, long-term exposure to cortisol causes anxiety and depression. It can cause heart disease. It can cause high blood pressure. It can cause digestive issues. It can cause weight gain. A lot of those things come from long-term exposure. We're not meant to live in a world of constant cortisol. On the flip side of that, there's oxytocin, and oxytocin is known as the love hormone or the bonding hormone. It's the thing that gives us that warm feeling when we're intimate. It's what causes babies and a mother to bond. And it also is that good feeling you get when you help somebody. When you do something good for somebody, you get that good feeling, right? And the cool thing about oxytocin is that it's not just the giver who gets it, the receiver gets it too. And it grows. The people who see it happen get a hit. So it's like a whole community can feel good because people are helping each other. And on top of that, oxytocin suppresses cortisol. And because of that, we get health benefits. We get lower blood pressure. We get less heart disease. We heal faster. We get lower rates of depression and longer life. A lot of people that are helpful to other people live a longer life. So I guess what I got out of that was that Mother Nature's pretty clear. We didn't start out self-interested and competitive. The preferred option is that we help each other. And it makes sense. Yeah. If we were helping each other, we're probably going to live longer than if we fight each other. And I think we've let this popular narrative of survival of the fittest, it's kind of won the day. And it's what we hear all the time. And the fallout's been pretty damaging. If you look at business, for example, and I'm sure you see it just as much as I do in the business world, we've put profit over people. Making money is more important than people. And in the leadership world, we've made management more important than leadership because, controlling people is the only way to get the most out of them. And we've over-indexed on quantitative stuff, all the stuff we can measure, over the stuff we can't. And all the stuff we can't measure is all that human stuff. And so it's made work pretty toxic. And it's caused businesses to do things in their own interests more than the interests of the people that they serve.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
As a leader, you're responsible for the mission and the people assigned to you. Regardless of the size of your team, employees are depending on you for their lives and careers. For the sake of your team and the people who entrust you with this role, you need to master the skills to become a great leader. Best-selling leadership author John Rennie is proud to introduce the Qualified Leadership book series. This new series teaches you how to become a people-centered leader. Great leaders know that employees who are respected, appreciated, and allowed to grow will go the extra mile. These books provide real-world leadership wisdom written from a hands-on perspective. If you want to be a more effective leader, this is the one book series you should read this year. This 3-book series contains the following best-selling leadership books: I Have the Watch, You Have the Watch, and All in the Same Boat, for one low price of $39.99. Begin your journey to become a leader worth following. Go to johnsrennie.com and get your order in today.
This episode is brought to you by Giving a Shit. That's the title of a new book by Neal Woodson, but what does it mean exactly, and how can it make a difference to you, your work, and your business? Well, in this brand new book, you're going to learn that and so much more. With stories about a homeless man on a subway platform, a comedian who found true purpose, a florist who lost their way, airline attendants who delivered happiness, and a hotel that demonstrated a difference. We learn about compassion, the real business of business, and why human skills are so critical to success. This easy-to-read book is full of lessons you can apply directly to your life and leadership journey. Giving a Shit by Neal Woodson is available now on Amazon.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
Well, one of the things that, you talk about, it just makes so much sense. I mean, we are social creatures, right? Look at the anxiety and depression that came out of the pandemic when people were isolated. They couldn't be around others, right? So we don't like being isolated, right? But yet, as you said, the narrative has been be competitive, take care of yourself, survival of the fittest, take care of number one, right? But where life gets really good and where we really get a lot of joy out of it is through community. It's family. It's having a tribe. I mean, I would say, what we did in the military was difficult, right? But we had a crew. We had people that had our backs. We loved each other. I mean, that sounds weird, but we absolutely loved each other. And we wanted to make sure that we got each other home safely. And so that camaraderie that you have between military troops is a deep, and we veterans, we leave the military, we lose that bond that we have. And that's what you're talking about, that cooperative, that helpful, that working together towards a common goal. We lose that and we miss that. It took me 7 years to figure out my true north after I left the military because I lost all of that connection. And so what you're talking about makes so much sense, and it makes sense into what we see in data today. What's the problem what we're seeing with young people today? Anxiety and depression. How can that be? They have everything at their fingertips. I mean, social media should be like connecting people, and and what's happening is it's the competitive drive to get likes and shares and grow your accounts. Oh, this person has more than me. I've got to work harder. And instead of getting that community bond, we're getting that. The feeling of, I've got to do better and I've got to, keep up with the Joneses. And it's that competitive spirit, and it's only leading to more anxiety and depression. So what you talk about in the book makes so much sense with everything else we're seeing as well. So we are meant, as you say, to be competitive, to be cooperative, and to work together towards common goals.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we need to go with the organization. We need to work in that direction with our organization and make them that way.
So how do we begin that process? How do we make our organizations more cooperative and helpful? I know as a small business, it's easy for me because we do feel more like a family. And I know that some people might laugh when they hear that, but these are like the people I'm close to every day. And we are more like a family than we are a company. We are looking out for each other's best interests, and we are working together towards a common good. But I've also worked 22 years in large companies, and that's really hard to do. So do you have any suggestions on how we become more cooperative and helpful?
Yeah. I mean, and there's a whole second half of the book is about that. I think the easy answer is that we have to get them focused on service. And the reason I say that is because people often ask me, they'll say, does that mean we have to focus on the customer? And I say, no. So then they'll say, well, does that mean we have to focus on the employee? And I'll say, no. And they're like, well, what do we focus on? Service. Because if you're focused on caring for people, you're going to take care of your customers, your employees, your investors, and your suppliers, because all of those are part of making you successful, and you're part of making them successful. I mean, think about it. In those relationships, you're both providing value. Your customers get products and service from you. You get revenue from them. Your employees, they get paycheck. You get the work done. Your investors get a return. You get capital. Your suppliers get revenue. You get an inventory. And it's all about relationships, and it's all about people. So how do we get organizations to focus on service? That's the real big question. And what I did was I looked at a couple of things. I had been to a hotel down in South Florida where I saw this in action. I saw this, what I'm going to describe to you in a second, in action. I'll do it quickly. I also saw it in an individual. I talk about a comedian in the book and how he did it. And he actually focuses on service in what he does. But it comes from something I experienced with my parents. When your parents told you they wanted to teach you how to say please and thank you at the dinner table. So if they were like my parents, my dad, he said, at some point in my youth, he said, when you ask for something, you say please, and when you get it, you say thank you. So he set the expectation. And then mom and dad had to do it. If they weren't doing it, I wasn't. And then, of course, when I went to say, hey, can you pass me the salt? My dad would look at me and he'd say, pass the salt what?
Yes.
And I would say, please. And I'd give it. And then he'd continue to look at me. And I go, thank you. Yes. And that continued until it became a habit for me. And I think you got to do kind of the same thing for an organization. So my model is you have to align the organization to service as a priority. It has to be messaged constantly. It has to be, this is what we do, this is who we are. Your leaders have to lead it by example. They have to demonstrate those behaviors to the people that they lead. And you have to have service everywhere. Kind of like I said to my guy on the golf course, everybody in the organization has to help each other. You can't expect just one segment of your organization to be helpful. Everybody has to. And finally, you have to put care in everything. It's not just about the people. It's about your product. Your product can't just be functional. It needs to be friendly. It needs to be something that your customers can understand and use easily. Your processes, they can't just be efficient. They got to be easy. Because if they're difficult, it's almost like a person being difficult. So if we circle back to my golf story where I said, everybody has to serve, I would now say everybody and everything has to serve. So you've got to put that same care. It has to be displayed in everything. But if the organization can start doing all of that, now all the cylinders are moving, and you can make it happen. That's how you get the organization moving in the right direction.
When I hear you talk about that, and I contrast that with what I typically see in organizational cultures with respect to how they treat people, and then customer service organizations and how they treat people, I would say that you have a real competitive advantage if you can embed service in your organization. If you care to be helpful to others, right? To the customer who calls, to your colleague who needs a hand, to your boss or to your subordinates. If you are there and you actually care about people and you make that a priority as in your organizational culture, you're like head and shoulders above all your competitors, right? I mean, to me, it seems like a major competitive advantage if you have that in your culture. Does that make sense, or do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. In fact, in the book, I talk about, I give a good example. I can do it really quick. If you're making coffee and you go to the grocery store and you buy coffee beans, you go home and it's cheap. It's cheap. You go home but you do all the work. You do everything. You got to grind the beans. You got to do everything. You have to do all the work. You can go to a convenience store and they do part of the work. They brew it and do all that, but you have to make it and all that stuff. You have to put in all the stuff to make it the way you want it. And that costs about 3 times what the coffee that you bought. You bought the coffee, it costs about 30 cents a cup. You buy it, at the convenience store, it's like $1.50, $1.25, whatever. Or you can go to a coffee shop. You can go to a Starbucks or what. and they do everything, and they do it all. And you get to go sit in a nice comfy chair, you get to listen to music and use their Wi-Fi. Ooh, it's luxury, right? And you pay $350 for that. So the coffee's the same. It's coffee. What's different? The effort and the luxury. That's what's different. It's that service that's changed. And so it's profitable for a business to do it. And yes, it's a definite game changer. I mean, Starbucks is a little light years away from the convenience store.
Right. I just, I found it in my little business. We our vision, if you will, or mission is to be a different kind of supplier. And so when the big guys say no, we say yes. When the big guys say that can't be done, we say it can be done. So we just sort of take the opposite approach to big business. And really what that comes down to is a service mindset. We are like, for example, in big companies, you have a quality problems. The first thing they ask is they try to figure out what you did wrong, right? With the product of the industry I'm in. So the typical competitors are like, what did you do wrong? How did you break it? And so we take the opposite approach. We say, when someone calls and says, that this thing's failed, it's like, well, send it back. We've got another one on its way already to replace it.
Yeah, love that.
And so what does that say? Well, so if I take the risk and buy from a small company, John's small company versus buying from the big guy, I could get in, I could be a risk, but it's not a risk because if anything goes wrong, John sends him a replacement part right away and doesn't even ask any questions.
And I think a brand that does that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they only have to experience that once, and they know this is the way they treat people. I'm sticking with them.
That's 100%. And not only that, in my industry, people talk. And so, because it's a B2B business. And so I sell to the utility industry, electrical utility industry, and they all talk to each other. And like, I had a problem with the peak product, but they just sent me a replacement. No questions asked. And you're like, tell me, you want to spend less money on marketing dollars or less, dollars in marketing? Do that a lot.
Yes.
And the word of mouth is going to get you more orders and you know what to do with.
Customers are your best marketing tool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, it's what you go back to is you talk about, it's about caring. It's like, I don't want you to be down. I want you to get back up. I'm going to send you a replacement. We'll figure out what happened later. And that's like, well, I take care of you first. And then we worry about the details.
Yeah, it's not about winning a game. It's about solving a problem.
Yeah. I love that. So what do you hope to happen as a result of this new book?
I would really love for just to start the conversation. I want to get people talking. And then for those brave souls that want to make change, that they go out and make some change. Whether it's in their personal kind of service excellence practice, or if it's for an organization. I mean, if it's somebody like you who runs an organization who says, you know what, I'd like to change my organization. I want to make it better. I want it to do this. That maybe they do that. But ultimately, or at least at first, I'd love to just have the conversation get started and have it be something that people are talking about and saying, we need to make some changes. So that would be the first step.
I like it. Just start beginning that conversation. And again, listeners, if you're listening in, you're saying, wow, this makes a lot of sense. That's why Neal's on the show. And that's why we are getting you to think about these things. And again, we want you to be successful. I want you to be successful as a leader, and I want you to make a difference as a leader. And one way you can make a difference is by caring and caring for others, whether it's it's your suppliers, it's your customers, it's your coworkers, it's your boss, it's the people in your community. You do that and you can make a difference. And it can also be a competitive strength for you to be more profitable, more successful, live a better life. So again, these are timeless principles. As Neal pointed out, it comes from our history. It's how we were originally designed to work and operate as humans, and we've got to get back to it. So Neal, well, if there was one thing you could tell people that would make their life better and make their world a better place, what would it be?
One of the bigger messages in the book is to pause. Take a pause and start to see other people and just be kind, It doesn't have to be big, giant stuff. It doesn't have to be big, time-consuming stuff. It can be, just give somebody a smile, open a door, share a kind word, let somebody in on the freeway, but do it and start doing it every day. And take that moment to pause and just see people instead of thinking of, I've just got to do my thing. It's all about me, because it's not all about you. We need more of that.
I love it. How many listeners, how many times have you heard me say, leaders, it's not about you? So people, it's not about you as well. So that's a great message. So Neal, what's next for you?
Well, I want to continue to do the work that I do. I work a lot with smaller, medium-sized companies to share with them these ideas and to help them either grow their leadership or grow their service practices. But I also have a couple of book ideas, and one's about the fact that most of us do kind of everyday jobs, and what can we do to make those jobs more meaningful and kind of create a noteworthy brand for ourselves. And then the second idea I have is I've been teaching about service for years and years and years, and it's to kind of pull all that stuff together and kind of put it in one place into almost like a handbook. Here's a bunch of things, something you something you wouldn't read from cover to cover, something more along the lines of, here's something I can do. Here's something kind of like that. I don't know. Those are just a couple ideas floating around in my head.
Well, as you know, you're part of the Deep Leadership family. So when you do get those ideas in paper, we're going to have you back and we're going to talk about them, because I do love both those ideas. The idea of worthwhile work is such an important thing. We had Ken Blanchard on the show, and we talked about that, the importance of worthwhile work. And it's one of the things that I taught in my first manufacturing plant. We made people realize what they were doing had an impact on the world, and being able to connect them to that versus just, machining or plating a part. It's like, no, you're actually making something that keeps the lights on, and you connect them to something worthwhile. The other thing too is, if you think about it, a lot of our identities is associated with what we do, not necessarily who we work for. So we're a great sales manager. I'm a great salesman. I'm a great manufacturing manager. And so our identity also comes from what we do, not necessarily who we work for. So I think what you're talking about your next book, I love that idea. And there's a lot of neat stuff on that as well. So I love that idea. So we'll definitely have you back. That's certainly one that I love to talk about. So, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners today?
I'm going to leave you with the last 4 words in the book. Go do some good. Go do some good. Think about what you do and why you do it. Is your priority what's best for you, or what's best for something bigger? Is it, hopefully it's for something bigger, but I'll go back to take that pause and think about what you can do and go do some good.
Absolutely love it. Go do some good. Listeners, you're hearing this. Hopefully it's firing you up, because it's firing me up, and I want to do some good in my business and in my community and in the people that surround me. And hopefully you want to do that as well. Neal, how can our listeners find out more about you and all your books?
I will give you about 4 or 5 things real quick. You can go to my website, nealwoodson.net, Neal Woodson, all one word, .net. My books are both on the website. They both have pages on the website, nealwoodson.net / The Uncomplicated Coach. That's my first book, The Uncomplicated Coach, all one word, or nealwoodson.net / gas, or giving a shit. And that's the page for that book. You can find me on LinkedIn. Dial me up on LinkedIn. Just dial in Neal Woodson, Neal is how you spell my name, Neal Woodson. Search for me, please. I like to connect with people. And I post all the time on X or Twitter and Instagram. And my handle there is @Neal Woodson, all one kind of word smashed together. So I'm all over the place.
Absolutely. And we're going to put links in the show notes for all of Neal's resources. And again, if you follow me on Twitter /X, you know that I interface with Neal a lot. I'm always retweeting, sharing, because he's a man with a lot of wisdom around the subject of service. And again, absolutely, I highly recommend that you pick up this book. It's called Giving a Shit. And the links are in the show notes. All the links are here. And again, go out and get yourself a copy. If you're watching it on YouTube, you'll see it's a bright orange cover. And it's absolutely a beautiful book, and it's well written. And the foreword is phenomenal, by the way. Had a great author in doing the foreword. But here's the deal, listeners. Neal and I have a special opportunity right now for all of you to get a free copy of this book called Giving a Shit. So here's the deal. This is what you do. The first 30 people who subscribe and comment on this video that you're watching right now, and you comment below me on this video, you will receive a free signed copy of this amazing book. So we have 30 copies that are signed copies, and I will mail it out to you. If you like this video and comment on this video, and also subscribe to the channel. So just go to YouTube, search Deep Leadership, and you're going to find all of the videos for this podcast and other videos as well. But you want to look for the one with Neal and I talking about giving a shit, and you're going to want to comment on it. And the first 30 people to do, you get a free signed copy of this book. Now, I always say that we give free things out on the show. This is a free thing. And again, it's in celebration of our 300th episode. Neal, I'm so happy you could be my guest on number 300. I love this book. I love what you do. And keep doing it. And we'll have you back when the next one is finished as well.
Thanks, John. Been a privilege.
Thank you very much. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Welcome to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing, where we harmonise your mind, body and soul. I'm Amanda, your sound therapy expert.
And I'm Stephen, the curious explorer uncovering the mysteries of sound.
Together we explore vibrations, frequencies and the power of sound therapy and tuning forks.
Discover ancient wisdom, reduce stress and tune into a healthier life. Subscribe to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing today.
Welcome to the Candle Power Hour. Come with us backstage behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your host for the Candle Power Hour.